Dan, I want to turn to you and talk about the level of pressure that President Trump is under right now to deliver regional stability, to deliver an answer to his own constituents who are not happy with this war. And at this point, how much of an impact do you think his conversations with Netanyahu, his conversations with Israel are going to have on his decision making going forward when it comes to this deal?
I think Trump needs to come out of this looking like he didn't lose, looking like there is some version of an achievement that could not have been accomplished without the war, because the war is hugely unpopular. So the Americans perceive they paid a price for this war. The American people, they need to be convinced that they're getting a return. It's going to be extremely difficult given the framework that seems to be emerging here. As Yaakov said, we don't know fully exactly what it'll be, but I think I know what it won't be. We will not have a deal where Iran gives up its nukes, its ballistic missiles, its militias, and does democratic reforms, and enters a process where the regime will be replaced by a different one.
So how can Trump then justify this deal?
I don't know. I really don't know how, because a deal whereby Iran simply gives up its existing highly enriched uranium and agrees to verification that it won't, enrich anymore at a weaponizable level was achievable before. And indeed, that's the exact same deal that Obama made in 2015 that Trump walked away from, goaded by Netanyahu. Mm-hmm. And every viewer should know, Iran, in the assessment of the Mossad, the CIA, and the IAEA, did not have highly enriched uranium in 2018 on the day Trump walked away from that.
So obviously, we just heard Naveed kind of paint us a picture of what is happening on the ground for the average Iranians amidst these ongoing discussions that there could, in fact, be a deal that is signed between Israel and Iran. Dan, I know that you want to talk about what you think the messaging is right now in terms of, America's strength in this situation and, the lesson that other countries across the region, you could say, perhaps foes of the United States are taking from the fact that Trump is willing to potentially sign a deal in which we're not going to necessarily see true guarantees that there will be no nuclear Iran.
Oh, there can never be true guarantees. At the end of the day, you have to believe the verification is working. No one's going to believe the Iranians' word that they don't want nuclear weapons or don't want to keep their options open. But however they spin it, the deal that appears to be on a table is going to be some version of the 2015 deal. That is why the Netanyahu-Trump conversation yesterday was interesting, because they added the condition whereby the Iranians would have to dismantle all their enrichment facilities. Now, most have been destroyed, and some people will tell you all have been destroyed. Mm-hmm. But that would mean Iran gives up on its so-called right to enrich even at a civilian level. That would be a high bar. That would indeed be different and better than the Obama deal. It seems to me extremely unlikely, because the big problem in the way this war seems to be winding down is that the Iranians have experimented with shutting down the Strait of Hormuz and have discovered that it is stunningly effective, because the world doesn't want to pay even a small economic price. They had bet that the Iranian people can be made to pay a far greater price because of the blockade that attached to the Iranian action. But there's nothing they can do. Whereas in the West, governments will fear voters and they'll basically walk away. If this deal actually is made, it will mean that bet was correct. And it will mean that the world has very little leverage against Iran, because no matter what physical damage you visit upon them, no matter how many supreme leaders and their adjutants you kill, they can always shut down the Strait of Hormuz once more. The war could always have ended, or the continuation from this point onward was always going to be one of three: open-ended war that they can't hope to wait out, a continuation of the blockage, or a deal like this that Iran can present as a surrender. If Trump goes for option three, that will absolutely have significant geopolitical downstream consequences. And I think most people who are observing this, strategists that I've spoken to, wanted option two, wanted the blockade to continue, because the regime could not survive the impact of that. We just heard the situation on the ground.
Yeah, Owen, I want to hear your take on this. I also want you to just kind of give us some analysis as to what is going through President Trump's head right now, how under pressure he is ultimately at this point to make this deal come to fruition.
To be a fly on a nerve in Donald Trump's brain, and Natasha, to try to get into his head. First, to respond to a few of the things that Dan said, and I agree largely with it, except for a couple things. First of all, what we may be headed into, to borrow an abbreviation from Hebrew, is a mabam, a marachah ben a marachot, an operation between the operations. And in Israeli strategy, Natasha, Dan, as you know, this means taking advantage of the time between hot wars, between intensive conflict, to learn lessons, to rebuild, to regroup, and to plan for the next operation. And the reality is the Strait of Hormuz might become a disappearing asset, not in the short term, of course, but in the medium to long term. We already see the UAE expanding its pipeline to Fujairah to be able to get around the strait, which could really essentially solve the problem for them. Maybe there's a geographical solution for other countries to be able to diversify and send some of their oil and some of their gas through Saudi Arabia, the way the Saudis have done. It stands to reason that they will find a way to be able to get more of their oil and gas to the Red Sea. And the rest of the world will now know that this is going to be an ongoing risk, whether it be shipping companies, insurers, purchasers, and countries that simply need oil reserves, and will take it into account. And the Iranians won't be able to have the same degree of leverage with the Strait of Hormuz.
Diminish, but not disappear.
Won't disappear, but it could diminish considerably, especially in the medium to long term, certainly not in the short term.
Just some final comments as to what you think is going to happen next. Are we going to see a deal signed within the next 48 hours?
I don't know about 48 hours, but I would expect a deal to be signed. Everyone who speaks to American officials will understand that they're looking for an off-ramp and have been for some time. They don't want to resume the war. And the option I mentioned before, a prolonged blockade that will suffocate the regime, and it would, that could take 3, 4, 5 months, 6 months, maybe even up to a year. And the world economy doesn't have the patience for that. And so, unfortunately, there's a number of questions still on the table. One of them is, might the Iranians get total sanctions relief and total asset unfreezing? They're demanding this. If any such thing should happen, then this is nothing short of a strategic disaster. I don't know how much Trump can really resist the political momentum that is pushing him to find a way to do a deal, any deal. And it kind of seems to me like the best case scenario is a reopening of the straits, the learning of the lessons from that disaster, and a resumption of the JCPOA, with Trump trying to explain, not very convincingly, why it's better than anything Obama could have ever done, and certainly Sleepy Joe.
All right, well, as per usual, we're going to have to wait and see how this one plays out. I'd like to thank both of our guests for joining us. This is Middle East Now. I'm Natasha Kirchak.